Ah, okay. I'll be right back. Hey, kitty. Yep. I should probably dust some in here, especially as Murnau, he's allergic to dust and he's been sneezing a bit lately. Yes, he has. Granted, I use my own prescription eye drops for him. There's some human medications that are perfectly safe for pets, and um, I learned that from my veterinarian actually. And let me purdy myself up some. There we go. Because as Dorian over on Herbs and Altars says, it's often a little nicer to be looking at a face that's been made up. And where's that um, filter I like? There we go. That is it. Yes, looks like it. Okay, so at least as of the time I'm streaming this, it is Halloween. I tend not to go out on Halloween so much lately for a number of reasons. One, it has quickly become like in my lifetime, I've seen it go from a predominantly children's festival to a largely adult focused holiday. Um, Meaning that there are crowds everywhere, and not especially introverted as far as my personality goes. Whenever I do those Myers Briggs tests on the internets, uh, I usually come up a bit more on the extroverted side. I do enjoy being around people and enjoying the company of people. While most people, even like the very like strongly extroverted people, do like that's one thing that a lot of people misunderstand about Jung identifying those two personality traits is most people are neither strictly one nor strictly the other. Most people will have a combination of both. So like most people would fit what would probably be better described as ambivert. It's just the whole Myers-Briggs thing. They wanted to make it easier. The I think it was originally two women, and then it was expanded upon by a man. I don't know. There's somebody's probably done a history of it. So, um, but they just wanted to consolidate this all into some really neat little categories. And I've seen people say, "Oh, it's like the zodiac for nerds," and I'm thinking, other than the fact that there is something to astrology, it's just most people don't understand how astrology actually works. Like I can definitely see the comparison. Like it's yeah. Like if your only exposure to astrology is like a newspaper horoscope, based on your zodiac sign, which, I've, that's little more than an advice column, really. And it's very seldom, those are very seldom actually written by anybody with any kind of background in, astrology. And, I'm being like any legitimate background in astrology. So, there is something to astrology. It's just that it's very poorly understood. Hello, Murnau. Hi, kitty. Hi, hi, hi. But yeah, they're not wrong. If your only exposure to astrology has been like newspaper horoscopes and shit, it's easily comparable. So yeah, like I am a little bit more extroverted, but I do get claustrophobic in crowds. So I've like mentally prepped myself for it, and I never know like how all of the parties at the bars and whatnot. There's supposed to be some kind of big party going on at this tap room in downtown Ypsilanti out on Michigan Ave. It's only like, I want to say like 4 or 5 blocks from me. So it's easily within walking distance. And while this last week, I know I skipped the med vlog. I don't know if you were looking forward to that, but I did refill my pill pods, but I skipped the med vlog. I was just in so much pain. I was going to, like, on the day I was supposed to do it, I literally took the last of my pain medicine. I didn't have new pain medicine until Monday afternoon after I saw my psychiatrist, because while one of them I could, I just like went to the My Chart panel for my physician. So there's this My Chart app. I don't know if your health system has it, but U of M Health Services has it. So I just went into that and requested a refill on one of them, but the other one necessitates that I have to call in and personally request it, not just use the app. So I basically had no pain medicine until Monday. Like even the one that that I requested the refill after I ran out, like that still needs somebody at the office to at the clinic to call in, and they're not open Saturdays after 1 in the afternoon, or Sundays at all. I don't think there's anybody there on Sundays other than like custodial kind of things. If there is anybody besides that, they certainly aren't authorized to do prescriptions. Or if they are, they just don't, whatever. But so like I was just not in the mood to do a med vlog. It's like my pain is still pretty high right now, but higher than I'm used to for an everyday thing. But this last couple of days, it's been a lot better. In fact, yesterday, I just pretty much like I'd been taking the day off for most of the previous week, just due to pain. But yesterday, like my pain had been at a minimum for like for the first time in a good week. So I just like I don't know, I just kind of felt like taking the day off from doing things just to enjoy like pain at a level 3 on the scale. So without further ado about complete stuff and nonsense. So it is the final Wednesday of the month, and if you had tuned in last month and the previous month, I do a reading from a book. This month is going to be, I'm going to pick a random chapter out of Lost Souls by Poppy Z. Brite. Now, if you have not read this before, Poppy Z. Brite is a trans male author. He still writes as Poppy Z. Brite. But this was his author picture at the time he wrote the story. He was 25 at the time this was published in, I want to say 1993, because I first read this when I was, I want to say 12. Oh, 92, yeah. Okay, yeah, so it wouldn't have been I first read this when I was 12, so it wouldn't have been any later than 93. So yeah, this is a gay vampire book. In fact, it is like pretty much the gayest of the gay vampire books. Like you think Anne Rice knows her gay vampires? Well, Poppy, now known as Billy Martin, really wrote them with the gusto. The vampires in Lost Souls are literally born that way. They are a subspecies of human that um, is generally indistinguishable from humans, other than older generations have pointed teeth, but as they've been interbreeding more with humans, the younger generations do not, and sometimes file them down. And so, so yeah, like starting with the whole born that this way thing, this is very clearly a gay allegory. It's just like it is like one of the most obvious um, stories to use vampires or any sort of supernatural creatures as it's as an allegory for being gay, bi, lesbian, transgender. So I opened up to chapter 18, and let us start. And I need water. Oh, I've got somebody here. Say hello to me. Or shout obscenities in the chat, whatever. So, chapter 18. Heavy rains came to Missing Mile during the night and turned the weather cold. Turned the sky leaden. The last days of goldenrod withered and died under a coat of rime, and people shoveled last year's ashes from their fireplaces. It would stay cold now. Sometime in the dull gray afternoon, some weary of silence, Ghost put down the map he was drawing with crayons and said, "I'm going to bike to town. I want some wine." Steve looked up from his book. "Shit, Ghost, it's freezing. I have to go to work in half an hour. I'll drive you in." "I don't need a ride. I'm dressing warm." Ghost pulled his drab layers of clothing around him. "I like the wind in my eye." "Hi, cat. Please don't climb this." "Oh, Jesus. Please. Just please don't." Okay, I'm dressed warm. Bill pulled the drab layers of clothing around him. "I like the wind in my eyes." "Suit yourself." Steve unfolded himself from the couch and pushed the straw hat more firmly down over Ghost's head. "Call me if you get icicles on your balls. I'll come pick you up." As Ghost rode, the wind sluiced over his face, froze the winter tears in his eyelashes, whistled through the spokes of his bicycle wheels like a lovely song. His hair whipped across his face, pale and cold. The grocery store was painfully bright after the dark day. Ghost wandered among the shelves, studied candy bars and magazines, finally chose a bottle of Supernong wine. It took most of the change in his pocket. Ghost hated to carry cash, hated burying things at all. No, hated buying things at all. But the wine was 40 proof, good and high. Wino wine, the kind he always drank, even though Steve ragged him to hell and back for it. He put the bottle in his saddlebag and walked his bike down Firehouse Street, looking into dusty shop windows, stepping over the cracks in the sidewalk. Outside the hardware, he stopped to talk to the old men who congregated there, playing checkers with orange and grape knee-high bottle caps and a beat-up checkerboard. The men were as dry and tough as hard nuts and would not move their gatherings inside until the snow flew. The grape team was winning today. Ghost greeted the old men by name. "Hey, Mr. Galvin, Mr. Barry, Mr. Joe." "Hey there, Ghost. How you?" "I feel bad times coming on," he told them. He hoped one of them would know something about it, but the old men just laughed at him. "You and your long-haired friend been smoking that dope out of your place, Ghost?" "Nah, he's Ms. Deliverance grandkid. If he says bad times coming, then there's bad times coming. Maybe we'll be dead by the time they get here." The oldest, most wrinkled man shot a stream of brown spit into the gutter. "Shit fire, save matches." Ghost took the long way home. It was twilight now, and the streets of Missing Mile were deserted. The hills were checkered with the yellow light of faraway houses. Steve would have gone to work by now, but Ghost hoped he had left a light burning. He rode past the town limit signs, the fields that stretched away on either side of the road and dry, already stripped of their harvest. Across the furrows, and a window glimmered on the dusk. He thought of the twins he had seen up at the hill, the twins who should have been shriveling in their graves, but were instead vibrant and alive. He hoped the bad times that were coming didn't have anything to do with them. He was pretty sure they had been nothing but shades, things only he could see, maybe even brought to life by the dream he had had about them. But they had terrified him for no good reason. and they had known about the little boy dead on the road. Had even implied in the sly manner of spirits that they had killed the boy. At the corner where Burnt Church Road met the highway, a tall figure sat hunched behind a sign that said Roses, the flower seller, the same one he had seen on the way back from Miss Catlin's. He was sure of it. Some stunted pumpkins and gourds were piled around the base of the stand. The ghost tried to ride past without seeming to notice the flower seller, but as he drew close, the figure got to its feet and spread its arms wide, wider, immensely wide, stretching. The sleeves of its long, dark cloak billowed. Ghost slowed his bike. Everything in him screamed danger, but he had never been one for turning away from things that scared him or running from them. He would talk to this person, try to figure out what the sick feeling and worry were about. Roses? Asked the flower seller. Or a jack-o'-lantern to light your path? Ghost pulled his hair in front of his face. He had seen people who looked a little like this, their pale gauntness and loose black clothes vaguely similar. Such people had sometimes visited his grandmother, bringing her mysterious powders and oils in murky bottles, or buying herbs from her. They had scared him. Sometimes he saw the skulls beneath their faces, long pale orbs, or the bones in their hands as clear and luminous as an X-ray high cat. Sometimes he felt their thoughts focusing on him for an instant with a flicker of cold interest, like a flame in a dark tunnel of wind. But none of those had worn sunglasses and gloves in hot September weather. None had sold roses and pumpkins at the side of the road, and none had eyes quite so cold or so desolate. I don't have any money, he said, or I'd buy a pumpkin, but you ought to pack up for tonight. It's too cold to sit out here. Even as he spoke, a night wind seemed to be whipping up, carrying the russet smell of autumn in from the fields. For pity you may have a rose. And I was just packing up. The figure stepped closer and tucked a deep red bud into the lapel of Ghost's army jacket. When one of the long, thin hands brushed the bare triangle of skin at the base of his throat, Ghost shivered, even though his gloves and the flower seller's fingers were as cold as bone as loneliness. Ghost looked up into the flower seller's face. Those cold eyes glittered somewhere deep in shadowed sockets. Ghost looked quickly down at his own torn white sneakers, but it was too late. All at once he caught a rush of images, not words but feelings. The first thing he sensed was age and dark wisdom beyond his ability to measure. He knew this was no man. The second was a terrible, resigned loneliness, a longing for someone he thought might never come. The flower seller's mind was like a sentient void, too empty even to be sad, colder than the night. Without thinking, Ghost said, "You'll be warm when your friends get here." The pale face snapped up. "What friends? Have you news of Zyla?" Ghost stumbled backward. No, I only know somebody's coming. Somebody must be coming to pick you up, or I guess maybe you live around here." His mouth shut. He shut his mouth before his words could get any more tangled. Ghost seldom had to make excuses for things he knew. Not everybody wants his heart looked into, his grandmother told him. When he was very young. So look if you have to, but learn to keep your mouth shut. Since her death 6 years ago, he spoke of such things only to Steve, or to no one at all, but sometimes things just materialized in his head, and he said them out loud before he could stop himself. As soon as he felt that emptiness pouring out of the flower cellar, he had known that friends were coming, already on the way. As much as he feared to wonder what sort of friends they might be, the resurrected dream twins, or worse. He had to say it. Comfort might warm those cold eyes. But the eagerness glittering in those eyes put a stupid panic into Ghost, much like a moth beating itself against a window. Panic that made him want to hide anything he might know. Hide his own head. This is the bad times coming, he realized. The start of it, anyway. You don't know them, the flower seller said flatly. Now Ghost was no longer afraid. Now he felt only a terrible, empathetic loneliness. He might have been as hollow as a gourd. What if nobody in the whole world loved you? What if you were alone? I'm sorry, Ghost said wildly. The flower seller leaned across his wooden stand. His eyes met Ghost's, and his tongue darted out over his pale lips. The long, thin hands trembled. Then that cold gaze darted toward the moon, and the flower seller drew himself up and knotted his fingers together. "Get away from here," he said. "What?" "Go." Now there was a light of desperation in the deep-set eyes, hungry desperation. It looked like, "Go now if you want to live." The last light of day disappeared from the sky. The flower seller's face was partially obscured by the growing dark, making it look pointed, feral. He made a half-despairing, half-starved sound deep in his throat, and seemed about to lunge right over the stand. The ghost had already straddled his bike, shoving at the kickstand, reaching up with one hand to steady his hat, and pedaling as hard as he could. After a few minutes, he stopped and looked back over his shoulder, but the flower stand had, and the lone figure, if there, were hidden in shadow. The T-Bird was still parked in the driveway when Ghost rode up, though the house was unlit. He leaned the bike against the side of the house, where the paint was flaking away. By now, it was almost too dark to see, though weak moonlight limned the edges of the clouds. On the porch, Ghost almost fell over a crate of beer bottles that Steve had dragged out of the house. Then he pushed the door open and was inside, throwing the deadbolt lock, turning on lamps. There must be light to keep him from thinking about the flower seller out there in the deepening night. Steve lay on the couch, blearily rubbing his eyes against the sudden brightness. Several empty beer bottles on the floor beside him. He had been using a pile of dirty sweatshirts for a pillow, and his face still bore the faint pattern of seams and creases. Ghost felt something under his foot. Steve's keyring lay by the door as if Steve had hurled it across the room. He picked it up, rubbed his thumb over the plastic tab that said Budweiser, held it in his hand. The keys jingled faintly against one another. The house key, the keys to the T-Bird, and the rolling disc record store where Steve worked. Other keys obsolete and useless, but too venerable to be thrown away or tossed into a drawer. There was a feeling on the keyring like the object's aura. Steve's emotion as he had last touched it. Disgust and nausea. It gave the metal a cold, faintly slimy feel. "Did you call in sick?" he asked. Steve nodded. "Was just going to have a beer before I went to work. Next time I looked down, 4 of them were gone, so I just kept drinking. Might as well call in drunk for all the difference it makes." "What happened?" "I fell asleep and had this dream about Anne. I dreamed her face was all bloody and some of her teeth were knocked out. I reached out to touch her and saw my hand was bloody too. I'd done it to her. You know what I really did to her? Do you know about it, Ghost?" Ghost looked at the floor. "I guess you raped her." "I guess I raped her too. I guess she didn't mind. I guess she liked it pretty good." "Come on, Steve, that's a shitty thing to say. She didn't like it." "Whose side are you on?" "Yours." "How do you know she didn't like it? You read her sick little mind or something?" "No, I went over to see her the other day." All at once, Steve was up off the couch, grabbing handfuls of Ghost's sweatshirts, pushing his face up close to Ghost's. "What the fuck do you mean you went to see her? You went over there without telling me?" "I wanted to see how she was." Steve stared into Ghost's placid face. He knew he wasn't scaring Ghost, not in the slightest. He was only making a fool of himself. But the alcohol in his brain refused to let him shut up. "You stay away from that lying cunt," he snarled, "or else you decide whose friend you really are." Ghost's wide blue eyes met Steve's, forgiving but unrelenting. Ghost would not soothe Steve this time, would not capitulate. What the fuck did Ghost know? Ghost hadn't gone through Anne's mind games, hadn't been betrayed by her, but here he stood, oh so self-righteous. It would be easy enough to slap that obstinate look off Ghost's face, to shake the visions out of that thin body. What was he thinking? Hit Ghost? What the hell was he turning into? "Jesus," he whispered. "Jesus Christ." "He's not here," Ghost said sullenly. "You gonna put me down?" "Shit no," said Steve. He pulled Ghost down on the couch with him, hugged him tight. I'm so sorry, don't hate me." Ghost didn't say anything, but his hands found Steve's face, touched Steve's aching temples, and smoothed back his messy dark hair. Steve let his head droop onto Ghost's shoulder. Holding any other guy this way would have made him feel like a fag. With Ghost, it wasn't an issue. It never seemed to matter. After a few minutes, he tried to speak. The words came like slow drops of blood from a ragged wound. I tried to call her a couple times. hung up when she answered. Real cool. And then I got Simon, and he wouldn't let me talk to her. And she asked him to screen her calls, I guess. I guess I fucked up pretty good. I know, said Ghost. I know how things work. And you probably do too, Steve thought. You probably know everything that ever happened to us. The hot lights, the sodden silk texture inside her, the excuse me, the weeks when things were starting to go bad, the ether of betrayal, the look on her face, and the moment of absolute shock, like falling into deep icy water when I realized I had really, for Christ's sake, raped her. He pulled away from Ghost. He felt his face contorting, but he would not cry. He would not cry. For a long time they sat in companionable silence. Steve felt his drunkenness receding into a comfortable buzz, and Ghost opened his bottle of Scuppernong wine to catch up. They were booked at the Sacred U the following night, so Steve dragged out his guitar and they ran haphazardly through their set, knowing it didn't matter. They played the U hundreds of times. They might play there 100 times more, and their little group of fans would come to drink and dance, and nothing would matter except the exuberance of playing. Let's listen to the tape, Steve suggested. He thought he ought to remind himself what the songs really sounded like. Ghost stumbled to the stereo, and soon Lost Souls filled the little house, the guitar hard-edged and gloriously mad. Ghost's words bittersweet with a visionary longing. We need the roots, but you can't dig up the tree, Ghost sang along with his own golden gravel voice. So walk the mountain roads with me and drink some clear water. Steve sang along too, strumming the guitar. Those were the words of a visionary, weren't they? Those were the words of somebody who remembered what magic was. There was magic left in the world. There had to be. Steve banged at the strings. Beneath the noise, he heard a fiery, chiming melody. Ghost lifted his head and sang louder. His voice soared high and found its way through cracks in the windows and walls, out into the sparkling night, down the road that led past the house. At the sound of that voice, an old passing drifter looked up and remembered a train track he had hiked along down to Georgia some 30 years ago. A train track flanked with riding kudzu and towering pines and the bewitching scent of honeysuckle. A train track that had made a 2-bit bottle of wine taste of nectar and cool shade. The drifter, whose name was Rudy, lifted his face to the chill, cloudy sky. A mile down the road, he would find himself in the arms of Christian, whose hunger by now overshadowed his taste for thin children in black. But the last few minutes of Rudy's life were spent in sweet memory. Back in the house, Steve stopped playing and smacked his forehead. I forgot. Some mail came for you. Our first fan letter, I guess. Steve dug through the clutter on the floor and found a postcard, creased and dog-eared, its colors muted with the grime of small-town post offices. Ghost read it. You don't know me, but Dylan Thomas drank 18 straight whiskeys on November 9th, 1953, and I'm drinking one for you. He looked up at Steve. It's signed nothing. What about it? Or what's it about? Who knows? Why don't you hold it to your forehead and find out? Go on. Tell me to fuck myself. Suck my aura, said Ghost, and swigged the last sweet drops of his wine. And I promised a chapter, and that is what I'm delivering. So, as to the thoughts I opened up with, and I'm not fucking around with books right now. I don't know. I kind of got sick of how Halloween, like I said, in my lifetime, I've seen it transform from a, children's festival all about trick-or-treating and, haunted houses and shit, into a, largely adult holiday that what? I don't know. At this point, it's just like crowded bars and, and expensive, costumes. And while I do like to hit the after Halloween sales at Joann and Michael's and even Target and all that for anything left over that I might find vaguely usable, even if just to decorate with. yeah, I don't know. I just can't get into Halloween so much anymore. I would love, and I think a large part of this has to do with the fact that I just kind of feel disconnected from so much of what my friends do. Like, I can't even afford a cheap, bagged costume. Um, Plus, like, I wouldn't even want to wear one of those. Like, but even if I wanted to, like, I can barely afford even those. Um, and while I've got some friends who are so talented at making their own costumes, um, yeah, it's you still have to be able to buy the supplies and everything. So, like, if I were to fully participate, I would have to plan things a year in advance, basically, and just needle through it all year. And honestly, like, um, I don't know. I don't think it's worth braving the crowds half the time, and the other half the time, um, I'm just content to just like go and hang out with my friends at whatever events they're going to. So I don't dress up anymore. Just combination of money and inertia, and I I don't know. Like, that's one of the few times I feel like even vaguely claustrophobic is when I am in a crowd. And if I've mentally prepared myself for it, I can usually brave through it all right. Um, the the literally two biggest crowds I've ever been in personally were both concerts. Um, can't remember which one came first, but let's just say Gogol Bordello, because that was at I think the Magic Stick in Detroit, and I was not expecting that to be as big of a crowd as it was. I guess I just didn't really realize that they were as big of a name as they are for a real. They're basically a punk band. They're basically a punk band. Like, I could have easily imagined for the Ramones in 1985, but I did not imagine a crowd that size for Gogol Bordello in, I don't know, let's just say it was 2006, okay? Just for the sake of simplicity, it was 2006. I know. Oh, yeah, that was earlier, because that was, I want to say, 6 months to a year before this was done. It was a September, I want to say. And I went to go see Dead Milkmen, the, I went to go see Dead Milkmen, after this. It was the following Halloween. I basically like went out to Philadelphia. Like, I took the Amtrak to Philadelphia just to see Dead Milkmen on Halloween. It was their reunion tour. So yeah, like, Dave Blood died a few years before that. Um, so yeah, Dave Blood died. I want to say I was 23 when Dave Blood died. When I heard that Dave Blood had died. Um, and that was really sad. Like, everybody, like all the other like original members of the band, they were just like, the reason we broke up is because Dave Blood, he had gotten tendonitis, which is nerve damage, that greatly affects your tendons, and basically he couldn't play bass anymore. Who was their bassist, right? Here's the yeah, because Joe's the guitarist. So he couldn't play bass anymore, and that crushed him. They all agree that just crushed him. That it would have been disrespectful to Dave to replace him. They loved him. He was a great friend of theirs, and so they were just like, okay, let's just disband, and if something works out, if your hands get better, we can reform. We can go do other projects for now, but like, as far as we're concerned, Dead Milkman is on indefinite hiatus until Dave's hands get better. So that was like officially what was going on. Like like they broke up in the most technical sense, but but yeah, like Dave, like his I don't know if he could have even afforded surgery for it, or even if a surgery for it was even going to do any good. But basically, had been working, doing custodial work for the almost 10 years that since the band had broken up, just because they didn't want to do it without him. Wouldn't have been any fun. So yeah, all the surviving members agree that he just kind of lost the will to go on much more, because you know, this was what he genuinely loved doing, was, you know, being in a band. And, you know, yeah, like it's the Dead Milkmen, you know. And the crowd that they had at the reunion Halloween show. So yeah, that was 2008. So that was 2008, and it was at the Trocadero Theater in Philadelphia. And like I said, I took Amtrak out there. I took Amtrak out there. Everything I brought with me was like, you know, in my backpack. This old school, you know, old school gutter punk style was me. Like I think my hair, let's see, my hair was auburn at the time. Like I'd kind of stopped dyeing it, so it was like mostly it's natural auburn. I'd I'd taken a rinse to, you know, help bring out the reddish tones a bit more. But yeah, like I had an auburn mohawk, and I was expecting a big crowd. I was expecting a big crowd, and like, you know, like my ex, um, yeah, this was after the last time we'd broken up, but you know, we were still living together as roommates, still good friends. You know, he's just like, you know, you know, it's the Dead Milkmen. I mean, they're pretty damn famous for the bands you listen to. You're sure you're going to be okay with the crowd? I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. If I'm not with the crowd, you know, I'm sure they're less crowded area of the theater, right? And there was, and there was took. Like I'm off to the, let's see, this was a shot taken from the stage, a big panoramic thing that they, you know, did, and I'm just barely visible, like to the right. Um, no, wait, I think I might have dyed my hair purple at that time. I think I did. I think I might have. But yeah, like I'd been emailing Joe. I'd been emailing Joe, and you know, I was very excited about the show, and um, but yeah, so yeah, like that was a huge crowd, and it was an all ages show too, and you know, it's an all ages show on goddamn Halloween. Of course it's going to be crowded. Of course it's going to be crowded. It was full of kids, and full of kids hopped up on goddamn candy, like oh god. I had the little fun-sized packet of Skittles from that show. I still have the fridge magnet that they made and gave out to, you know, like the first couple hundred people in, because I lined it right the fuck up. There was this. There was this. I should do a story time about this, but yeah, like those are the two biggest crowds, and the Dead Milkmen. Like I honestly thought I was gonna be like crushed by 14-year-olds at some point. So you know, like I kind of like found I kept myself in easy access of emptier spaces, so I was like kind of on the edge of the crowds. You know, like if you look up that picture, I'm barely visible. Like you can totally see the glasses and the round ass face. Um, I can't remember if my hair was purple or auburn at that time. Um, I might have been wearing. I can't remember if I was wearing my faggot tank top or my Pansy Division T-shirt that I made. But I was wearing one of those two. So like, but you can barely see me from up here. I'm bringing up my finger like there because everybody was. But yeah, so like I said, you can just barely see me, but I'm right there, and that's because at that spot, there was real easy access to, you know, like an empty naked area where, you know, there were far fewer people, and I was like right behind these two guys. And Joe is like old school gay punk. So of course, like a lot of the local Dead Milkmen fans are gay because, you know, they know Joe from, you know, way back, and like but yeah, like a lot of the local Philadelphia Dead Milkmen fans are gay, and that was great. And I met these two guys, and they'd screen printed these these St. Smithers Medical Facility and Pork Sausage Distillery not t-shirts, work shirts. It was the little work shirts with the button down, and on the back of it, oh god, this I've got to make a story time about this. But yeah, that's oh shit, I've been going on longer than I thought. So okay, I promised you a chapter. I read a chapter, and I've rambled on so much. So as always, darns, bats and kisses, and I love you all so dearly. And please let me. Why do you want to put my finger in the shot? And we cancel. Yes, stop.